Ladies, gentlemen, and esteemed participants, following Aaron's thought-provoking keynote that explored the evolution of GenAI, reinforced the AI-first, people-first mindset, and highlighted top use cases for nonprofits, we now turn our focus to the intersection of GenAI in the nonprofit sector, including the support for refugees and displaced populations, particularly relevant as yesterday was World Refugee Day. I am excited to introduce our esteemed panel of experts who will explore the challenges, opportunities, and ethical considerations in utilizing GenAI within nonprofits. It promises to be an insightful panel discussion to drive collaboration and positive impact for nonprofits worldwide. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Seema Iyer from USA for UNHCR, Alex Kasavin from Microsoft, Annika Grosse from Avanade, and we are also fortunate to have Aaron Reich join our panel. To get us started, would you each give us a bit of your background and your role in your respective organization? Seema, let's start with you. You're having audio issues? Oh, there we go.
Okay, I got it. Sorry about that.
No worries.
But thank you so much, Almin. And Aaron, what a fantastic overview. Really appreciate it. I know things are moving so fast, so it was really great to hear your vision. But my background, I am the Senior Director for the Data Science Innovation Lab at USA for UNHCR. So we're trying to bring data and technology solutions to help the needs of refugees worldwide. But before that, I oversaw a data integration project for local government in Baltimore and thinking about how data can be used to help communities in distress situations right here in the United States, which actually could have included refugees being resettled into a city like Baltimore. But what I think is really interesting about this idea of the GenAI being a living system, in general, technology has always been like that. We have to think about technology like an archaeology. You're constantly building on prior technology, and you don't necessarily shed everything all at once. You kind of keep building on it. And so in that sense, the GenAI, building on top of a series of archaeological technologies that we've been working with for the last 20, 30 years, it's very exciting, but also exactly as you're saying, has some potential things that we need to think through as our staff and as our organizations use it. So I really appreciate your overview, and thanks for having me here.
Great, thank you, Seema. Alex?
Thanks, Almin. Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Kasavin. I'm a senior product manager at Microsoft, where I focus on our Cloud for Nonprofit. It's a portfolio of first-party applications designed specifically for nonprofit use cases. I work exclusively on our data and AI capabilities. So generative AI is something we're thinking about a lot in terms of how it can transform a range of functions for nonprofits. And in particular, I want to make sure that work gets done responsibly. So really excited for this conversation. Thank you to Avanade for hosting. Thank you, Dr. Iyer, for the work that you do, and looking forward to questions from the audience.
Great. Thank you, Alex. Annika, over to you.
Thank you. Yes, Annika Grosse. I'm based in Europe, so I'm responsible for our European data and AI business at Avanade. And so here I'm exactly at the forefront, so with clients on everything that you just heard in Aaron's presentation, which is, I think, a really good overview where we are just right now. And I think so one of the outstanding or the I think important things are, I think what I realized is that so with this technology advancements and everything that we have just seen in the past months, so I think so so what becoming more and more important, of course, for our clients is really to understand everything around their values, where they are, their culture, their strategy, to really elevate everything to the board level. And I think so what Aaron summarized at the beginning, so to really educate the entire organization on this and to be clear who you are is becoming extremely important to make so the application of this technology a success.
Great, thank you so much, Annika. Aaron, would you like to add anything else for your intro?
Nope. Yeah, no, just again, I look after emerging technology for Avanade, and I am part of our global task force that we've got on generative AI.
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us on this panel and agreeing. We're honored to have you here. As we've already referenced, yesterday was World Refugee Day. So I want to start with some questions related to that. World Refugee Day is an important event and that raises awareness about the challenges faced by refugees worldwide. How can generative AI contribute to promoting the narrative and experience of refugees? Alex, how about we start with you on this one?
Sure, thank you. So something that doesn't come up a lot in my professional identity is the fact that my family and I are refugees. We came to the United States from the former Soviet Union. May not look it, but I'm old enough to remember the former Soviet Union. And we had the support of refugee agencies like Hive in the United States, who helped us, get settled, find a home, and, helped me land in a place like Microsoft. So I think the work that agencies do to support displaced people is critical. And I think there's a high level of responsibility when looking at generative AI and other technologies. From my perspective, it needs to stay focused on the end goal, right, which is connecting those who are displaced with new homes, new opportunities, new educational opportunities. And there, as both Dr. Iyer and Aaron were saying, there's technology that's been around for a while, and it can be connected to those different missions. So as we think about telling the stories of refugees, collecting information from them, even doing the translation work, right? Making sure that you have the staff who can speak the different languages, who can translate resources that are being provided by governments who are often well-meaning, but the work that they produce is not always accessible. So how can you synthesize, generate summaries? Can you create educational resources that are targeted towards different audiences using generative AI? And can you also accelerate the work that people in the agencies themselves are doing? So some of you may have seen recent Giving USA data that showed that giving has dipped for the first time after a couple of years of record giving. So can you reach donors with more targeted stories? Can you help people inside the back office answer email faster so that we're not all burning out answering email, we're getting to the important work that we need to do? And I think there's the layer of responsibility that we'll talk about later, but making sure that the responses, the stories that are being produced by generative AI are always grounded and informed by the work of experts like Dr. Iyer and the folks she works with is critical, because the AI is trained on the body of the internet. It's trained on a lot of sources that may have some cliched, outmoded views of what it means to be a refugee, what it means to be a displaced person. So I think there's a give and take between organizations who are telling these stories and the foundational technology. So that's kind of an overview, but I think there's a lot generative AI can offer here while making sure we stay grounded and responsible in using it.
Great, thank you. Would any of our other panelists like to add to that or contribute to that piece? Any other thoughts?
Sure. Obviously, I'm thinking about this all the time. But thanks for sharing your background, Alex. I spent most of the 1990s in the former Soviet Union looking at where people moved. So you would have been a case study for me at the time. But thinking about this month, World Refugee Day, but then really World Refugee Month, the UNHCR, the High Commissioner for Refugees, released the global trends for 2022. And between 2021 and 2022, we saw the greatest increase in forcibly displaced persons since we started collecting data since World War II. 19 million additional people from not just the Ukraine, which is probably high on everyone's mind, but also in Venezuela and the Congo and Southeast Asia. So one of the unfortunate realities of that growth in this kind of movement is no matter how many pro bono lawyers we have to help people understand their rights, we're never going to get enough lawyers to actually help people with their rights. And in that sense, generative AI can really help with this idea of legal empowerment, using tools to help people understand what their rights might be much quicker than we can get to pro bono legal assistance for that growing number of refugees. And that is a really both exciting and potentially kind of groundbreaking way for generative AI to help refugees right now where they are, wherever they are.
Okay, great, thank you. So Seema and Alex, you guys gave some great examples of sort of right from the front end of helping refugees, like let's say with legal issues, to the back of the chain of trying to reach more people and bring more empathy to the plights of displaced people. Now, one of the items that Aaron mentioned was that the center of all this needs to be trust, and that is key. And you know, Alex, you sort of referred to that too a bit. We know how easy it is for false information to get out there, and so how do people know everything from the refugee that they're already vulnerable and they are trusting the agencies to support them in the best way possible, that if AI is being used everywhere, that to trust that information. So Annika, let's start with you. What can be done to show that level of trust and to sort of demonstrate that?
Mm-hmm. So thank you. I think so. First of all, unfortunately, so everyone who is working in this space just needs to do the same as another just business in the world. So we all just really need to implement so things with the same principles that Aaron already, I think, so alluded a little bit on. So just making sure that first of all, we are not just maybe to save money and just to get something out as help. We are just not neglecting everything, but maybe running things on a secure platform. So not just any, and you saw maybe or remember what Aaron said, what we have been going through internally. So really checking, so the applications and really doing a lot of work to make sure that we can use these applications in a compliant way, that our employees can just have access to it and leverage this for certain purposes. But so at the beginning, so not everything was green, and we had to really walk through and really work this through. And this is, I think, something where we need to start implementing so a type of, I think, a center of excellence, a hub somewhere in the organization where people really understand the implications of security, the implications if this is an ethical application of AI. There are also aspects, and this is also important maybe to consider sustainability considerations, because so GenAI requires a lot of compute power in the end, and and not everything that can be done with AI is maybe the best application for GenAI or AI. So maybe there are other ways. So there's always also a balance that, so you're not just trying to apply technology because it's there, but really thinking about if this is the right way, if it is ethical. You need to educate. And also, of course, I think a lot of this has to do with what Aaron also alluded to have a proper data platform in place, and a data platform or a platform overall. So you have also a lot of principles of making sure that only people have access to the right data that need to have access, or the applications you control a little bit. So it's not just collect every data and do with data whatever you want to do, but having some structure. And I think so these are the things that we all need to do, and this is not specifically for the nonprofit sector.
Okay. Oh, great. Thanks, Annika. Aaron,
hey, Almin, can I add something?
Yeah.
So
please.
I think this is the great challenge actually at the moment. I think we are at while it feels that AI is mature in maybe the way that it is sort of portrayed in the news, the way that it's talked about, our expectations that are around it, and it can do amazing things. We are also very early in this, but it has far-reaching impacts that I don't think we've even sort of figured everything out yet with. And there's this balance, and I don't really, I'm kind of curious, Alex and Seema, sort of your perspective on this as well, but like I sort of go, like, I know for a fact there's things, and this is public, that Microsoft are working on specifically with sort of other providers, Google, but also, in the image, like on what is real versus what is generated. And is there a way that then when I look at something on the internet or in the news or whatever, that there's some watermark or whatever it is that's in there, that I know that that's, you know, a factual image versus something that was generated or not? We're going to see these things emerge. We're in this sort of challenge, a chasm, whatever you want to call it, where we're building things and we don't have all of those things in place yet. And so what do you do? And I think, you know, there are checks and balances we can do our best to kind of put in place and try. And then is, you know, the bigger thing I look at is like, we are all human beings, right? And so we also have to sort of know how much we can sort of rely on ourselves, work together, and not just sort of inherently trust everything that's there, but we know that there's a given that sometimes people just do that. And I don't think we have an answer on some of these things yet.
So Aaron, I love that you brought up the question of image and text provenance, because that's one of the things I wanted to mention. So the last hot technology was blockchain, right? And it seems to have fallen out of discussion, but you know, blockchain is useful for producing an immutable record of a particular artifact as it moves. And there is a consortium that includes Microsoft, includes Google, includes some other folks on the media side as well, who are thinking about how to create those chains of provenance. That's one aspect. I think there's another kind of chain of agreements that exists between a recipient of services, a nonprofit organization, and any vendor or partner who provides services to that organization, right? The recipient has to know, if I'm giving you this data, how is it being used? How is it being stored? What am I getting in return? And similarly, the organization needs to know, if I am putting data into an AI model, how's it being used? How's it being stored? So, you know, I can only speak on behalf of Microsoft that when folks use our Azure OpenAI service, the data stays in your tenant, is never used to train any other Microsoft model. I think other vendors are making similar commitments, but not everyone is. So it's really important to verify that. I think the other aspect of it is, well, let's say I trust an AI model. I know it's not going to be misusing my data, but how do I know what decisions it makes, right? How does it explain its own output? And there you know, are software packages, things that can be applied there to start to get a sense of what factors are being weighed, how are they being weighed, but that's not always available in large language models. You showed a great example where they start to cite their sources, and certainly that's an increasing area of focus, but not every large language model does. So you don't actually know where it's pulling from, how it's generating its answers. And that kind of groundedness is critical to building that trust. So I think there's provenance, there's groundedness, and then there's the very basic data privacy and security at the foundation of it.
I also think in the nonprofit sector, you know, Aaron, you talked about this idea that right now it's 80% customized and 20% consume, but I think it's already probably, you know, 80% consume in the nonprofit sector, and maybe it will always be 80% consume in the nonprofit sector. There's, you know, I happen to oversee a data science innovation lab where we are trying to customize ourselves, but that's a very small component. It's more about consumption for nonprofits. And so I liked, you know, in that trust building, if we are the consumers, if nonprofits are actually going to be the vast majority of consumers only, we do need to really have leadership and fluency, as you said, to build trust and understand how to make, you know, keep our staff in check and make sure that we do put up those guardrails. So, for example, when you were talking about the spell check, yeah, all of us use spell check, which means that none of us know how to spell anymore. Is that okay? Is that a skill that's okay that is now apparently antiquated? If we are moving to consuming GenAI, what skills in our staff right now that we have to think about might need to shift, as you already talked about, but that isn't a threatening way, but it's actually an empowering way.
Great. No, thank you all. I mean, with the spell check, I wasn't very good spelling it before, so I was really happy when that came about. So it helped me. Seema, to sort of drill down on your sort of the comment about nonprofits sort of consuming 80%. I guess let's start with Aaron and Alex on this one. Do we see, like, do you see the potential of these models being built around industries more so then? So let's say there's one around nonprofit, then there'll be dedicated nonprofit that's built, that's customized, but then it'll be consumed by nonprofits. Are there those type of sort of large language models being produced? Do you think that will go that way, or will they be just more very specific ones like what we have in sort of coding or actual tasks, you know?
It's a good question. I can kick that one off. I think
Mhm.
the challenge with nonprofits, at least in the United States, one of our VP likes to say, you know, we don't serve a sector, we serve a tax code, right? The breadth of organizations who are classified as nonprofits in the United States is huge. It could range from environmental organization, health and human services, religious institutions, membership institutions. So it's very hard to classify them as one entity. I will say that there are common use cases that we are looking to build models around that are not necessarily large language models, but are more traditional ML models. So, you know, for example, donor behavior, things like that.
Mhm.
Many nonprofit organizations, though certainly not all, rely on donors and gifts. When it comes to large language models, fine tuning can be expensive, right? I think it's also not necessarily accessible to every nonprofit organization, and it may not even apply within a specific nonprofit subvertical. So I think the approach that we're looking at is to look at prompt engineering as a point of education, right? And think about as the window of text input you can put into a large language model expands, coaching folks on how best to use that space so that you can proceed with specific content and guidance, get the kind of output you would expect. But certainly we look to our partner community like Avanade to help kind of extend into specific subverticals of the nonprofit sector where appropriate to develop models like that.
Okay, thank you. Aaron?
I think we're going to see, I'll just use the general term kind of around ISV, so a software company. I think we're going to see, even to what Seema said, right? So I think the majority are going to be in consume, and I think we're going to see, for lack of a better term, sort of knowledge modules that then can be used for specific kind of tasks. So it's not broad tasks like coding, but it may be, we have a whole thing we're going to do around grants. And there's things that you can then do and pull from that have grant knowledge sort of modules as a part of that. Someone's going to do something around donors. Something's going to do something. There still will be horizontals for marketing and for, you know, other pieces that are there. But I think we're still so early in that, like, there are, well, I'll use a different example of, like, you know, I used to do spell check before, now I use like Grammarly. Like, for anyone that has like put something in the Grammarly, right, to see like how good your, you know, sort of language is and what you're doing there, like that's for a specific task, but it's utilizing different sort of knowledge modules across that to kind of help for what you're trying to do. I like to think of that mindset of that's what's there for where we're going to see an organization. They're going to pick and choose different components from different vendors. Some of that, again, may be a little custom, but I think most of it's going to be in our workflow. We're using this to help us do X, Y, and Z to achieve whatever Y is as a part of that. And that the models are going to be built as part of this sort of unique sort of set of industry specific things that need to sort of help and to help tasks get done in some respect.
Okay, great. Thank you both. So bringing us back into the sort of the theme of refugee and displaced people. Seema, how do you feel generative AI can foster that sort of empathy and understanding amongst the general public regarding the experience of refugees? Like going back to, you know, one of the points that Alex made in the beginning.
Well, certainly in the world of, you know, donor acquisition, helping people who have some likelihood of potentially helping in this world. So of the tax code, you know, we're the humanitarian sector. We're trying to help people right now who are facing all kinds of challenges. So, you know, generating a very effective message to somebody who might be just on the edge could mean the difference between a donation and not a donation, and then, you know, help to a refugee or not. And in that sense, the value proposition is huge. Right? To turn on a donor engagement because we had the ability to think through using the technology, you know, a better way to communicate is amazing. You know, if you, especially in the refugee space, anything you do needs to have 20 different languages, and some of these languages are very are not very common. You know, some of the sub-Saharan African languages that are not common in the United States, but you still need to translate into them. So that is something very quickly that we might be able to turn on to try and gain donors that might be able to help. So I think there's immediate great use for generating kind of more empathy and generating more communication, and the translations are a big part of that, but then also just the sentiment, you know, the sentiment aspect of the GenAI is really exciting, I think.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I mean, when I was at the Red Cross, back when we'd have to look at resettling people, you'd always have to find someone to do the translation. And that's not always the case. You can't always, like you said, there's some sort of languages that you may not, depending on where you're settling that people, you may not have a large population to go to bring in that sort of personal translation. So the how far it's become and it's evolving, it was definitely a huge advantage. Okay.
If I can also,
Yeah, please.
if I can chime in here, I think this is an area where it's important to think big and start small, but think big, right? When you look at the ways that displaced people first enter a system or have a first conversation with a placement agency, there's going to be an intake interview. There's going to be somebody sitting there, you know, probably furiously writing things down on a paper form, probably not even digital data entry to start in many cases. How do you synthesize a story and, you know, get a case file ready, right? Can you extract entities? Can you flag certain people based on the substance of the interview for certain kinds of interventions for people who are at risk, right? Families getting separated, you know, there are significant risks involved in the process, especially as Seema mentioned, given the scale of the problem today. So that can A, help the agencies do their first work, but then B, kind of take that, you know, de-identify it and use that to bridge the empathy gap, right? Because I think people have a very fixed view of what it means to be a refugee or a displaced person. And the more of those stories can be cataloged, translated, converted into narratives that can be published in a, you know, safe, secure, and compliant way, the further we'll get to closing that empathy gap, I think.
No, it's a great point, and particularly like Seema mentioned earlier, is if you're starting to give people the information they're looking for and making it very specific, that sort of people will be more inclined to sort of intake that information and to sort of then they'll remember it more, right? And so that's the way to sort of handle that gap, was opposed to just sort of mass message. Okay, thank you. Well, Alex, I mean, since you spoke last, please, yeah.
I also thought about when you were saying, is it generated or is it real? I'm sure there's a big spectrum there. We're going to get to the cyborg version of everything, right? And the question is what percentage was generated versus what percentage was human related. And I think in that sense, the volume of things that we might be able to connect with because we can generate the foundation is great in the humanitarian sector. But having then the staff be able to just kind of do the tip of the iceberg and before it gets sent out to make sure it's accurate, and but they don't have to do, because the volume coming at us is so big.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, the funny thing is when you mentioned the cyborg, before I was thinking like, you know, the one phrase that we say a lot is like, you know, technology can do a lot to support a nonprofit, but it won't be able to put that blanket on a person. I mean, now if there's a cyborg, that might change, but you know, it still won't be the same, will it? Okay, we know nonprofits are already strapped with resources. They're already doing multiple jobs. And Aaron, when you mentioned that, you know, it's a living thing now, AI. So you're constantly having to sort of be dynamic as an organization to flow with it. How can sort of nonprofit tech companies, AI communities sort of collaborate together to have solutions that really address the needs and challenges faced by nonprofits?
So there's two parts of the way that I kind of think about this. One of them is I think there's a movement that we're going to start. I mean, it's already started, but it's going to be bigger. So if you look at so I'm going to talk specifically kind of from a generative AI side. Some of these models are what I would call closed models, right? So it's like you're accessing them, but you don't know kind of what's in there and kind of how it's being made. We are also at the burgeoning of now sort of open source models. And I actually think we're going to see some really interesting innovations over the next year on the open source side. And I think that is a very interesting place for nonprofits to think about sort of being immersed in and figuring out. And while I don't think there's anything there yet, to sort of, Almin, your question earlier around like the future of kind of where are kind of, if it's going to be consumed, what does that software look like and how is that being developed and where are those knowledge modules happening? I think there's a real burgeoning kind of thing that's going to happen in certain industries where the open source side of this is going to have a lot of that in there. And that particularly kind of in the nonprofit space could be one where there's actually a lot of innovation that drives, hey, we're trying to do these things. We are resource constrained. We're all contributing to the same goal. How does that sort of form around, one of these large language models that then has a subset of that is serving, maybe it is grants, maybe it's donors, maybe it's something else. So it's not a perfect answer kind of your question, but I kind of think of it in this, like, we're doing a lot of stuff with kind of closed models today. I think there's an enormous amount of innovation that's going to happen on the open side and that there's opportunity. But I would still say it's very, very early from that perspective.
So maybe I can add just one aspect. So as we said, so this technology is really disrupting us all. So everyone that is working right now on things will have co-pilots at their side to be more efficient, and there will be a lot of focus and built-in models to automate things, to make things leaner, faster, easier, to democratize basically also and help others to be also an expert on some items. So this also will have an impact and can, so where nonprofits can benefit from by not needing this full workforce, maybe just managing the process, but maybe having then also capacity for other things. So it's so there is also, I think, an element of efficiency gains, and then so getting so maybe some time to focus on other priorities. And in order to achieve this, I think there is always an opportunity to partner with the technology firms in that sector to really get going. So one is definitely, I think, also like Aaron, an open source idea, so to benefit from that. But the other thing is to really work with the technology providers for around global citizenship to make sure that you can really harvest these technologies for your organization.
Perfect. Thank you, Annika. So before we go to a technology provider, let's first go to Seema. So it's great that you're talking about open source right now. So, okay, what are your thoughts on that?
Open source all day today. And just by way of my background, I've been in the open data world for 20 years. Opening up data for local governments was my background before I came here. So what I found over this idea of openness is that which is awesome, but then it's a lot, there's a lot of openness. The key is having good navigators, right? The trusted Sherpas through all this openness. So that relationship that we can build within the ecosystem amongst tech companies and humanitarian sector and nonprofits is really about making sure that we all can help navigate through continuously changing technology that's only growing faster. So thinking about, not only trust within your own organization, but trust across these organizations is going to be a key component. So understanding how we work, understanding what we do, the open communication is also a part of open source. So really thinking about navigation is where I am.
Yeah, and I think also, Alex, before we come to you, in terms of that open data and that openness, it has to be that clear communication to the beneficiaries or the people that you're getting data from, how their data is being used, what is being used, and why. Because a lot of times they may just say yes without understanding it, just because they're in such a vulnerable state and they want to just get the support and the help, opposed to challenging that. So, Alex, how about in terms of technology providers? So, being as one,
Sure.
how do you see this sort of partnership working?
Well, I would say even before addressing our work as a technology provider, I think it's critical to bring up some of the communities that exist for nonprofit organizations to connect and talk with one another. NetHope at the global level is a big driver of discussions around data and technology. N10 in the United States, there are tons of conversations going on around how models can be used sustainably, responsibly. So every organization's at a different place in its evaluation and its journey. Some are just thinking about, okay, what are our data retention, privacy policies? How do we communicate those to program participants? Others are a little bit further along. So I would say, start with peers, right? Start with other organizations in the sector who may have thought about something you haven't thought about, and vice versa. And then as you look at technology providers, we have, for example, a Azure grant program, right? Nonprofits can have $3,500 of Azure credits a year. And I'm a firm believer that kicking the tires on some of these tools and models is, has a 10x effect versus reading about them, right? So you could stand up a proof of concept in that time, working with a partner, working independently if you have the staff, and you can learn a lot about what's possible, what's not possible, what the constraints are, and you'll have a really good sense of how you want to use some of these technologies or not want to use them. So I would say, certainly look at what's available to nonprofits to start learning and using, for free or at a deep discount, because many technology vendors have that, and look at what your peers are doing and talk to them. And I think triangulating the peer community, the partner community, and the vendor provider community will get to a really good solution set.
Thank you. So we're about 5 minutes before the end. So before I go to the last question, did any of you and the panelists want to add anything else that you think we've missed or it's worth mentioning? No? Okay. So the final question, which I didn't share with any of you, is since we're almost, since it is summer solstice today, what is your favorite summer drink or meal? Alex, let's start with you.
Gosh, my favorite summer drink or meal. I recently discovered a Pim's Cup cocktail, which I had never tried before. So I'll put that one at the top of my list.
Okay.
But I also am a big fan of grilling, barbecuing in the summer.
Great way to spend it, yeah. Annika, how about yourself?
I'm a big fan of strawberries of all kinds, in drinks, on cake, in food. So I think this is really my favorite.
Wonderful. And I assume chocolate covered also.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. Okay. Seema?
I don't know. Summertime just means like corn on the cob for me, like corn on the cob grilled, steamed, whatever. I don't seem to eat corn on the cob anytime except the summer, so that's what I think of.
Brilliant. And Aaron?
I'm staying on the fruit theme, blueberries. Kind of,
okay.
yeah. So I'm in Seattle, and this time we're about a couple of weeks away from kind of true blueberry picking, which is just a lot of fun.
Nice. Yeah, for me, it'd have to be mangoes. For me, that's the summer fruit, like you, Annika, in any sort of form, whether it's a shake or a salad or whatever it might be. Well, thank you all. We really appreciate your time and all the your expertise and provided during the session, and being able to collaborate and go over some of these sort of significant issues that we see. So I'll hand it back to Ashley to close it off.